Hey, what's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another episode of a Frugal Athlete podcast. Today, we got a very special guest, someone that I've recently met, but have immediately connected with, someone that's doing amazing things for the athletes in the community, whether you're a student athlete, whether you're a current athlete, but most importantly, recently retired athletes. We got JR Butler, tech sales executive, expert, also entrepreneur. At the time of this recording, it is day before New Year's, day before New Year's Eve, and JR Butler is someone he's a man with a schedule. Got lots of things to do, but we thank him for making the time today. So, JR, appreciate you coming on. How you doing today?
I'm excellent, Amobi. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Nah, most definitely. So, for the folks that may not know you, obviously we got connected through a mutual relationship. Give us a little bit about your background.
So I'm originally from Boston, Massachusetts. I grew up in a big hockey family. My father was a high school hockey coach for about 40 years. He's actually in the Massachusetts Hockey Hall of Fame. I'm the oldest of three boys. I grew up playing multiple sports, hockey, football, baseball, and then played in college. And then when I retired, that's kind of when I started as you mentioned, my career in tech sales. Both my little brothers also played Division I hockey, and my middle brother played in the NHL. He played over in Europe, in Russia, Asia, and he actually represented the United States in the 2018 Olympics. And then my career took me from, I worked at a couple big companies, and then I was an early employee at a startup, went from about 20 people to 800 people and $2 million to $200 million in 7 years. And we sold the company to IBM for $2 billion. I ran multiple sales teams there, built out a go-to-market engine. And my last job, I partnered with the C.O.O. and ran strategy and operations for our whole entire sales organization. After that, I went on to another early stage startup. I've been a chief revenue officer for a couple of years in Moby, and I just recently, about 6 months ago, started my own venture. As you mentioned, I'm now officially an entrepreneur, and that's kind of how we got connected. I'm focused on helping athletes transition after their career, very specifically into software sales.
That's amazing. And thank you so much for the detailed, background. Can you talk about your own transition, from, playing high level at college, in the hockey space to, you said a little bit of professional as well. How is it, kind of taking a jump from college pro to your own transition?
So I can't speak for everybody, but I can tell you that my transition was really hard. I grew up, my entire life was dedicated to athletics, every summer, 7 days a week. First thing I thought about when I woke up, last thing I thought about when I went to bed was really hockey. And we all end up in a men's league locker room at some point, right? But, that day when it comes is really, really hard when you lose, the thing that you love the most. It's not unlike losing a loved one, someone that's been in your life every single day, your entire life. So for me, it was really hard. I struggled with it. I felt like I was in a position where everybody else was ahead of me, all my peers, because they had been thinking about what they were going to do when they were older. And all I ever planned for was really sports. So my transition was really hard. Personally, Moby, I struggled big time with like drugs and alcohol. I've been sober for a decade now, but my initial transition was really, really hard. And honestly, until I found my new mission, my new career in technology sales, I felt very, very lost.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, congratulations on 10 years. That's amazing.
Thank
And I
you.
appreciate your openness because a lot of athletes, struggle with some of the things that you just alluded to, but they're not as honest, and it's hard to transition. What I love about what you talked about, finding your next mission, I talk about it a lot with the Frugal Athlete. As athletes, we love to compete, we love the game. And I feel like you said that you found that with software sales. So talk about software sales and sales in general, and finding that next game, that level of competitiveness that keeps you I mean, doing very well.
Absolutely. So when I think about sports in general, right, and doesn't matter if it's hockey, if it's soccer, if it's football, baseball, volleyball, golf, all these different sports. When you look at kind of like what it takes to be successful, um, most things that are translating into sales are the things that are the
Mhm.
intangibles, right? So the reason that I've had success in sales, the reason the people that have worked for me and with me that are former athletes are good in sales are like the little things, right? Like preparedness, practicing things to get better, focusing on execution, right? There's very few jobs in the world where there's a scoreboard. Sports and sales are two of those jobs, right? You know exactly where you stand against your competition. You're also competing every day, right? Like there's a
Mhm.
winner and there's a loser in sales. So that aggressiveness, that discipline, that grit and effort that defined you as an athlete because you wanted to win is the same exact thing that translate into sports, and being prepared and focusing on execution is huge. Um, the other thing that I think is important is sales is a team sport, right? So no salesperson has ever closed a deal by themselves. There's a whole entire kind of group of people that go into selling a large software solution that as a salesperson you need to be able to pull these people together and focus on the same outcome. So, that team atmosphere, that locker room atmosphere that, you're playing, not just for yourself, but for the guy and girl next to you. And you're working with people that may be different than you, might come from a different background, have different personalities, like different music, dress differently. But at the end of the day, you're working together to achieve the same outcome. I thought I lost that forever until I walked into my first sales floor and it felt like I was back in the locker room again.
Mhm.
And I love that part of it, and the other thing is there's very few people that can be rejected and come back the next day with the same vigor and conviction that they had the day before. And athletes have that naturally. I don't know about you, but I'm assuming because of the success you've had, losses motivated me. Like
Yep.
I didn't get cut from a team or lose a game and then give up. It actually made me work harder. And in sales, you lose more than you win. Even the best salespeople in the world lose more than they win. So the type of people that get motivated from loss to work harder are the type of people that are extremely successful in it. So there's so many parallels between sales and sport. It's actually crazy.
No, I love that. And then for you specifically, you mentioned working at, some bigger firms and then taking a jump, working for a startup. How do you like, what was the process of like taking that leap of faith to, obviously the end result was amazing. Congratulations to you because the company sold earlier this year. But what did it take you to take a chance on yourself and the startup as well, less than 50 employees at the time?
Yeah, I think, where I grew up, I'm a first generation college graduate. So like for me, the way my family kind of talked about the future was like stability. Most of my family's like firefighters. And people think about what job can I get where I have a pension? That's kind of the thought process.
And you're the
Um,
oldest too.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So for me, that this wasn't something that necessarily I thought I would ever do. And then, I had a good buddy of mine actually that I met through hockey who explained to me one time, he was like, listen, JR, you can get rich on your W-2 as a salesperson. Like salespeople can make a lot of money. You can make $500,000 to $1 million a year fairly consistently for a decent amount of time. But in order to create wealth, you have to have ownership, you have to have equity, you have to own something and help build something. And the only way to do that is to get into a company early, get your shares, your ownership in the business, and then yourself and everybody else on your team builds the company to be more valuable. And then the shares that you get when it's small are worth a lot more money when it's bigger and when it gets bought or when it goes public. So the idea of creating wealth through equity was a fairly new concept for me. And people, it's funny, people talk about, the riskiness of a startup, but like at the end of the day, if you actually sat and compared what the job is, what the actual compensation is, meaning, your base salary, your benefits, your potential commission, if I removed a huge company name and a startup company name, and I gave you the same job description and compensation package, there would not be a very easy way to tell the two apart. So the risk of going to a startup is that the startup doesn't work out. But the risk of going to a big company is that a big company makes cuts all the time to make sure they meet their Wall Street profitability numbers. So actually, I would argue that it's riskier to go to a big company and just get buried in being one of 1,000 other people, and then eventually getting cut out of there out of nowhere, right? Like the CEO that got on Zoom and fired 900 people. So I think at the time I thought it was risky, but now that I know more about the venture space and startup world, I actually think that it's much less risky to go to a startup because you're getting the same compensation, but you're getting much, much different experience. You're touching every part of the business. You're not just another cog in the wheel. Everything that you do is meaningful. Every outcome that you drive matters to the bottom line. I had sales reps that worked for me that were 23 years old that closed deals that changed the trajectory of the company. Like you're not going to get that type of opportunity at a large, tens of thousand person company. So for me, it's not really necessarily about the risk. It's about the opportunity, if that makes sense.
No, that makes complete sense. And I think it's synonymous with the way the transformation of how athletes are thinking. You talked about wealth through equity, and then kind of betting on themselves, taking that chance to trust your abilities to get the job done. And I want to ask you because, another famous, person in this sales space, Mark Cuban, he says everyone should have a sales job at some point in their lives. I would love to know your sentiment around that before we get into, how athletes can benefit in the sales space as well.
Yeah, I mean, I use my sales skills every single day. I use my sales skills to convince my fiance to go to the restaurant that I want to go to. I use my sales skills to get a seat at that restaurant when I didn't have a reservation. You use it to influence, the people that you're surrounded by, your family, your friends. I think the ability to reach out to somebody that you don't know and ask them to spend time with you, which is what's, the entry-level sales job is one of the most valuable talents you can have, right? Like, just think about for your podcast, the skills that you're creating when you reach out to an athlete that you don't know at all whatsoever, that hasn't met you, and giving them a reason to spend time with you. That's what you do in sales on a day-to-day basis, dozens of times a day. Think about how valuable that skill is forever, right? And that's why Mark Cuban says that, because it doesn't matter what type of job you want to do. If you want to be an accountant, if you want to be a CFO, if you want to be a CEO, or if you want to be, someone that works in HR, you're going to be doing some selling, whether that's internally in your own organization, externally to other vendors and partners, or even, within your own department, right? Getting somebody to do something that you want them to do and convincing them that there's motivation in it for them and there's positive outcomes in it for them. That's what selling is. So I think that's a skill that's incredibly valuable for people to have.
No, I love that. And then let's get into the shift group, because obviously, you're very successful tech software sales. You don't have to start the shift group. You're doing well on your own. So what was the motivation behind the shift group? I know we talked offline when we spoke earlier. There's a little bit of a personal connection to it. And then how's it going so far?
Yeah, there's really three reasons I started the company, and they are all very personal. The first is, your question about like, what was the transition like for me? I wish that somebody like me was out there to explain to me at 23, like, dude, it's going to be okay. It's actually going to be awesome. And this is why. This is what the opportunity is. This is what the career path is. This is what it's going to take for you to be successful. So the number one reason I started the company is I know what the struggle of transitioning out of athletics is like, on a personal level. Also, from my family's experience, right? My brother played professional sports for 12 years, played over 800 professional games, represented our country in the Olympics. Incredible, like multiple all-star games, a couple seven-figure contracts. But he retired at 33 years old with three kids under 5. And all of a sudden, the agents, the players associations, the teams, the leagues, all these, folks and organizations that have been around his whole career were nowhere to be found. Right. And nobody really, I don't want to say nobody cared, but he didn't get the tools to like really make like a logical, rational transition. I remember he called me and he's like, what should I do now? I'm like, take a stab at a resume, shoot it over to me. We'll make some tweaks. I'll start making some calls for you. And he called me like 10 minutes later and he's like, JR, I don't know where Microsoft Word is on my computer. And I was like, I was like, crap, like this kid has been, playing sports for 12 years. The only thing he's used his computer for is watching Netflix on the road. So like that is the number one reason, is like giving these kids and these, former athletes an outlet, to quickly make the transition and avoid those dark times I went through. The second reason is, at the company I was at, that we sold, I interviewed over 5,000 candidates. I hired, probably close to 1,000 people, and we struggled to find the great candidates. Like, I had a saying, it was attitude over aptitude. But you'd be shocked to find out how many people will quit when something gets hard, right? Especially in today's society, we have a very short attention span, and there's a million other options and ways for us to spend our time. The reality is, the reason you make a lot of money selling software is because it's really hard, but you have to work through the hard points to get the value. And too many people quit when things get hard. So, and athletes don't quit, right? That's why that's how you become a professional or an elite athlete at the college level, is you've gone through a lot of adversity and you've come out the other side stronger. So the second reason I started the company is to help basically guys like me, girls like me, that are out there trying to build kick-ass sales organizations. Because I think our candidates at Shift Group are the best candidates that these people can possibly hire. And then the third reason, honestly, is just to educate folks on this career. This career changed my life, changed my family's life. There's not many things you can do without going to school for 4 years and studying something special, without getting certifications. Nobody cares where you grew up. Nobody cares where you're from. It's about, did you show up today? Did you do your job? Did you pay attention? Did you work hard? And are you getting better every single day? There's very few careers that offer that with the type of lucrative nature of, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on your W-2, right? You can be a doctor, you can be a lawyer. Like, these are, careers that people make a lot of money, but you got to go to school. There's all these certifications. Tech sales is about coming in, working hard, competing every day, getting better every day. And the outcome could be, it could be generationally life-changing for families. So I want people to understand that and realize that, because I don't think a lot of people know that you don't need to be technical to sell technology, right? Like, that's the biggest thing, is educating people on the career.
No, I completely agree about the education standpoint, because you see the growth of tech, and a lot of times you're saying, okay, you have to be a software engineer, you got to learn how to code, or you got to do all these different things. But tech sales is a lane where anyone can jump in if you do it the right way. So can you talk about the process of, say, I'm an athlete, I'm about to retire, I get with the Shift Group, fix my resume. Can we get some insight into, it's lucrative, you have a wonderful episode that you did as I was doing research, W-2 your way to $1 million. And obviously, as an athlete that's making money, they're going to, oh, okay. But talk about that process and the possibilities and the potential for, compensation in this software sales space.
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's just like sports in the sense that, you know, when you go from, high school to college, you become a rookie again, right? And the reality is that, in order to make this transition, you kind of carry the water bottles again. That's what I say, right? So you do start in an entry level job, but it's software sales, so you're talking, 60 to $100,000 in your first base salary job. You're carrying the water bottles. You're a business development rep, a sales development rep, account development rep, but essentially your job is prospecting. You're going out, you're understanding, what companies need your technology. You're reaching out to them to educate them on what your application or platform can do for their organization. You're researching past conversations that your company has had with the company. You're researching all the relevant news about their company, why they should care about your unique value prop. You understand, how we've helped other companies in their industry before. We understand like who we think we need to speak to at every single customer. We leave thoughtful voicemails. We send great emails that are researched and thoughtful. And then we systematically follow up with them with a cadence to get, and every time we talk to them, we bring value. And then eventually we get them to meet. And that's the job you do for the first, call it 12 to 18 months. And then you become account executive. And that's when you're the one who's doing those first meetings. You're qualifying the customer. You're doing discovery to understand how their current mode of operations work, where there's inefficiencies and opportunities for improvement specific to your solution. You're getting them to admit that they have pain, and then you're educating them on how you solve their pain, meaning your software. You're working with an engineer to do a demo and make sure that there's alignment with your technology and their environment. And then you're once you get them on board, you're ushering them through the close process, showing them where the return on investment is, what the total cost of ownership is, how much money are they going to save, and then, basically convincing them to give you hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. And when you move from BDR to account executive, you're upgrading into, guaranteed six-figure territory, 150 to $200,000. You're selling to like SMB mid-market companies, so companies under $1 billion in revenue. You do that for a couple of years, you get even better at selling, and then you get promoted into the enterprise space where you're selling to the biggest companies in the world. You're selling bigger deals. The deals take a little longer. You're talking to more people. You need to be kind of a little bit more focused on execution, and that's when you're making 200 to $500,000 a year, and that only takes 4 or 5 years to get to if you work hard, pay attention, and you're coachable. So it's a 3 to 5 year career path to get to that top level, and then you don't have to go that route either, right? And I know you and I talked about this, but there's opportunities from BDR to go into customer success, to go into marketing, to even I've worked with guys that have moved into like sales operations or finance before from sales, right? So they use their in to the company through sales to get and work in other parts of the organization. So hopefully that gives you a little sense of like what the career path is and the nature of kind of how much money you can make.
Oh, that's amazing. If you look at it from the athlete standpoint, that's your rookie deal. Usually 3 years guaranteed, 2 year option. So if you think about it, if you make it past your rookie deal, everyone's trying to get that second deal. And, so I appreciate the breakdown. I think it's really interesting to see, especially, someone like myself and a lot of my peers, as we get older, some of the different lanes that you can kind of jump in. You mentioned being a doctor, a lawyer, and no disrespect to any of those professions, but it requires another certification. Say you have to go back to MBA, you got to go to medical school, you got to take your LSAT. Where tech sales, and this might sound like an ad, but you can jump right in with the skills that you already have. And let's talk about some of the skills that are transferable, because I know a lot of times athletes have a hard time. Oh, well, I played soccer my whole life. So like, what is it? How do I translate? How do I tell them that how can we translate the skills and experiences that we've had from sports onto a resume to get seen in front of some of these, growing, developing companies?
Yeah, I think, when we think about the sales skills, or you call them characteristics, call them behaviors, you know, at the end of the day, there's things that you've done as an athlete your whole life that you got to figure out a way to communicate in the interview process, and on your resume and on your LinkedIn, right? So things like teamwork, problem solving, critical thinking. The behaviors I think of are most important are coachable, curiosity, and competitiveness, right? So like being coachable means that, like, the story I always use with candidates is, me and my brothers had this like shooting gallery in our driveway growing up, and my dad used to tell us when we were little, you got to shoot 300 pucks a day, right? And I would always shoot 500 just to make a point. But he would come home and he would say, how many pucks did you shoot today? I'd say I shot 500, Dad. And he would always ask me, well, how many backhands did you take? And in hockey, there's a backhand, and a backhand's really hard, and you're not really naturally good at it. And athletes are the only type of people that work on their weaknesses. Okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that's, in tech sales, when I started in tech sales, everything was a weakness. I didn't own a computer before I started the career. But the fact that I had spent my entire, teenage years into my early 20s working on weaknesses made it really easy for me to be coachable. It was Somebody can tell me that I'm not good at something. I don't take it personal. I just say, okay, well, how can I get better at that? How can I
Mhm.
work on that? And then I'm okay. I'm comfortable being uncomfortable. Right. So that's the type of stuff that if you can communicate it concisely and well in a conversation with a hiring manager, they're going to make an offer on the spot because they're like, all right, this kid gets it. Right.
Yeah.
And then you can structure, experiences, right, that you've had in the summers on teams. Like, we've helped guys that played 13 years of professional basketball in Europe, talk about how, going out to the community and driving people to come to the game. That's a sales
Yeah.
experience. Negotiating your own contract. That's a sales experience. We helped a kid who was a hot dog vendor at Fenway in the summer between his hockey career talk about how walking around the stands at Fenway selling hot dogs is directly related to selling technology, right? There's so much that you do on a day-to-day basis as an athlete, and that's kind of what our specialty is, helping you kind of see and make the bridge to make that connection, so that ultimately it's about communicating it to these companies and these hiring managers. And once they see that you see the likenesses, they're like, all right, I want to give this kid a shot. Like, I think he can do
Yeah.
really well because he gets it.
Yeah, I love that breakdown, by the way, the Fenway breakdown on your guys' video. We'll have that in the show notes, if JR allows it, for people that are interested in, using the Shift Group as a service to, you know more, learn more about the software sales opportunities that there are. So I appreciate you, sharing that.
Absolutely.
When it comes to, we talk about, the athlete transition, the potential opportunities to stay in a lucrative, you know, space. Obviously, this is a Frugal Athlete podcast. We want to talk about, personal finance, money management. What are some things that you would recommend, seeing it yourself, and then also, having a brother that's played at a high level, has faced multiple seven-figure contracts. What advice would you have for someone, that needs to learn more about their personal finance?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I think you preach this, but the first and foremost is like just forcing yourself to put away a percentage of everything that you make from day one. I didn't do it, right? I wish I had. I got lucky and had a big financial event later on in my life. So I kind of made up for lost time. But, I think me and my brother always talk about, like, I wish I could go back to like 22 years old and just every time I got a paycheck, just put 10% into savings, right? Like,
Mhm.
that's the basic stuff. The other thing that I think about now is like diversifying, right? So like, I have some money in the stock market, but I haven't put everything in there, right? I have a regular savings account. I have some money in the stock market. I also own some real estate, as well, right? So, and it's not just residential. There's also commercial. There's ways you can invest in commercial real estate without like putting up a big number. Like they have like ETFs and things like that. So I think, saving a percentage every time you get paid, no matter what, like, I'm laughing at myself because people have said this to me my whole life and I never listened to them. And I'm
Yeah.
sure there's somebody listening right now being like, oh, this guy's full of shit. Like I'm not, but I really like, I wish they just forced you to do that. Like I wish
Yeah.
when you opened a bank account, if you did automatic deposit every time, a certain percentage went over to savings, but that would be seriously huge. And then just thinking about like, the stock market crashes sometimes and real estate fluctuates, right? So if you can kind of, minimize your risk by having it, if you have enough cash to have it across multiple different places, that's a good position to be in for sure. And then, live within your means, obviously, right? Like
Yeah.
my brother, his first contract, he only made one big purchase. He bought a really nice car. He bought like an Audi. It was, for us, how we grew up, it was a really nice car. It was probably like $60,000. And I thought, we thought he was a movie star. He even actually let me drive it off the lot, which was really cool.
Love that.
Yeah, taking care of his big brother.
Yeah.
But like, if you can live within your means, like that's huge. Don't try to keep up with the Joneses, right? I always talk about going from, comparison to confidence. Like don't compare yourself to other people, and don't worry about what other people are doing. Focus on yourself and what you're trying to accomplish. And I think that can go a long way. And athletes should have that confidence not to worry about what other people are doing.
Exactly. And I know, you talked about hindsight, like what you and your brother would have done if you guys were to like start again, just from the standpoint of like to help the transition a little bit easier. What advice would you have for, some athletes? Is it like try to get some internships in the off season? Is it, just stay curious?
Yeah.
What would that be for you?
So there's a saying, it's called, it's not work, it's network, right?
Yeah.
When you're an athlete, when you're in the mix, when you're playing, you're the cool guy on the block, you're the cool girl on the block, right? If you're at a big school or you're playing on a professional team, there's people that want to be around you. Their kids look up to you, their companies are sponsoring your teams and stuff. So they'll spend time with you. One of the things that I think, people do that are thinking about the future while they're in athletics is get to know these people, understand what they do. Why are they so successful? Why are they able to afford showing up in the suite at the end of the game and meeting the guys on the team, right? Why are they a booster for your college? Figure out what career they do. Ask them about their career, right? I'm a big believer that tech sales isn't for everybody, but I do think that there is something for everybody out there, right? And the only way to figure out what's a good fit for you is to talk to people that are doing things, right? Internships are great and all that other stuff, but the bigger thing is, when you're focused on being successful athletically, you don't have a lot of time for that stuff, but you always have time to meet new people and get to know those people and understand their backgrounds, why they become successful, what do they like about what they do, what do they not like about what they do. And those types of conversations, you're going to start to learn a lot about what's out there and what the opportunities are, and what things offer the things that are important to you. And everybody's different. So the more people you can have those conversations with while you're still an athlete and they care and they want to talk to you, that's even better.
Oh, I love that. And I think the biggest thing I took away from that is you have to be intentional about it. And you talked about, being more interested than interesting, asking questions, being intentional, and making sure it's not just like checking a checkbox. So I appreciate you sharing that. And I think it's sound advice for any athlete at any stage to, start right away. So we're getting to the end of the podcast. Really appreciate you taking the time. For the people that want to connect with you, how can they do so? If they're wanting to learn more about, the transition, obviously software sales, you have a great course on how to, fix up your resume if you're looking to transition. What are the ways that they can connect with you if you'd be so kind to share?
Yeah, of course. You can email me directly at jr@shiftgroup.io, or just visit our website, www.shiftgroup.io. And hit me up. And, part of our process, like Amobi said, we'll help you with your resume, LinkedIn, and then we just put you in front of a bunch of different companies. We can connect you with our mentor network. We've helped, hundreds of athletes make this transition. So, I think hit us up on the website, hit me up directly on email, and we'll jump right in. I got a big team behind me, and we're going to really blow it out of the water in 2022.
No, I'm excited to see what's in store. Last question. Can you talk about the difference between working, startup versus starting your own?
Oh man. I think the biggest difference is I got nobody to point fingers at anymore.
Like the last line of defense.
Exactly. When I was a VP of sales, I could blame the chief marketing officer that our messaging sucked. I could blame the CEO that, our compensation plans weren't good enough to motivate the sales reps. I could blame the CFO for not negotiating deals. But when you start your own thing and you're in charge of everything, if it's not going well or if a mistake is made, I'm a big believer in extreme ownership. It's on you. Like when you point your finger at someone else, three fingers point back, right? So the reality
I love
is
that quote. Yep.
there's nobody to point a finger at, so all the fingers are pointing at you. That's the biggest
Nah,
difference, man. Is accountability, 100%.
no, I love that, especially as more and more athletes are becoming entrepreneurs as well. I think it's great advice to understand, like, you can't blame the coach for, oh, he don't like my style of play. Can't
Right.
blame the GM. Oh, he's trying to cut down on my salary. Can't blame. It's on you, and you got to be accountable. Take extreme ownership. But JR, thank you so much for taking the time. We're gonna have all your show notes in the description. So make sure, all your information in the show notes. So if you guys are interested, make sure you guys tap in with JR. Someone that's willingly, volunteering his time to help other athletes. He doesn't have to. He could be living on his exit, but he's doing a lot of great things that, helping other athletes. So appreciate you, JR, and hopefully we'll connect soon.
Awesome. Great to meet you. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Most definitely.
All right.